I'm George Farrelly at Tower Hamlets GP, and this is an interview with Virginia Patania, the practice manager at Jubilee Street Practice. It is about the MPIG Ready Reckoner and income forecasting. It is meant as a resource for Tower Hamlets staff, chiefly, in this case, practice managers and GP partners. Let me put this into context and explain in part why I am creating this video. I'm one of 4 GP leads on the Tower Hamlets CCG project, Quality in General Practice. This program has a number of aims, but in essence, we believe that in order to provide good quality, sustainable general practice services, we need a resilient, resourceful, passionate, and healthy workforce. And we also need adequate resources. At a recent meeting highlighting the funding crisis for some Tower Hamlets GP practices related to the phasing out of the MPIG, Virginia strongly encouraged us all, even those not affected by the changes, to know our data, to check what the future holds for each of us. I contacted Virginia to find out how to go about this. She offered to meet me, and I suggested videoing the meeting so as to make it available to others and save her the time of repeating herself. Before meeting with Virginia, let me quickly show you how to get the Ready Reckoner that Virginia is talking about. You may already have it. I did not have it. So I Googled BMA MPIG Ready Reckoner and found this. So you then go to this particular site and this is what you get. Down here, click on that and you then download the Ready Reckoner, which is a spreadsheet. So this is page 1, which has just got some information, and then you can either click there or click on it here, and that takes you to the actual spreadsheet where you input your numbers. So having done that, let's now go and meet with Virginia. Yeah, off we go then. Thank you, Virginia, for meeting. My question to you really is about when you were talking to us about
know your numbers.
Know your numbers, know your data in terms of predicting the future.
So there's a lot of data that you could know, and I think it would be helpful if you knew, but if you sort of had to pick 4 basic elements that I think are important. The first is the reckoner, which I think has been interpreted in a number of ways and has caused some confusion. And I think that unless we use this in the same way, people will come to a different understanding of the MPIG loss. So the reckoner is actually quite easy to use. What you've got is basically your last year's list size, which for us was 10,586, and then the estimate of your projected list growth for 2014-15. And this was actually dead easy for me to calculate, but I appreciate that everybody will have a different way of doing this. But we have a system whereby every month we calculate what our actual list size is, so the number of patients on our list size, and it's just quite easy to then sort of be able to calculate in a percentage term what your actual list growth is, which is what we did. So we project based on calculations that run back about 7 years, but maybe you've got a few months and that's probably good enough, that we'll be increasing our list size to 11,379. And I think this is the sucker. If you don't get this number right, your pounds per patient are very likely not to match what the NHS England's list estimates that they should match. Now this was quite controversial. So this is the column of what you actually earned last year. And there was a lot of debate around what the QOF figure would actually be for last year. We've now been paid QOF, so everybody actually does know their QOF figure, dead easy to insert. Here you put in your total MPIG payment for year. This is another slightly controversial line where we're trying to calculate the amount of money that's removed from the patient online risk monitoring and the remote care monitoring DESs. And I think what some people have tended to do is struggle to calculate it, number 1, but number 2, actually put in the real earnings that they made. And a lot of practices didn't actually make a lot of money through these 3 DESs, so this ended up being a 0. That can't be a 0. We've explained this in a few forums, but basically if you put 0 here, it's like saying if you didn't earn all the QOF points, are you okay that they're just cut by however many you didn't earn? No, you're not, because it's potential profit that you're looking at. So here I would look at the DESs, the exact payment mechanisms, and estimate the maximum amount that you would have earned if you had achieved those DESs fully. which is incidentally the way NHS England has also calculated these. Your global sum is calculated automatically based on your list size for the previous year, and then you've got your out-of-hours deduction, which changes slightly from this year to next year, or actually from last year to this year, and then you've basically got your net global sum. So from all this, it would seem that last year we would have earned 1.1 million, £1,102,000, and that this year we'll earn £1,107,000, which I think is what is confusing a lot of people, because it looks like we are earning £4,000 more than the previous year. But actually, because we've taken on almost 1,000 patients, what the loss ends up being is an actual £6.86 loss. And for us to know what our loss is for the whole of next year, all I do is calculate the difference between the previous year's patients, this year's patients, which is about 800, multiply it by £6.86, and there I come out to my 78 grand loss. So this will help you make a very quick estimate of what you're actually likely to lose. And this takes, I think, about 15 minutes to actually produce.
Right. Are we finished with that now?
Yeah, this one's done.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So, if I understand correctly, really what you're saying is, in a way, the value per patient in terms of the income is gradually decreasing.
So you've basically got 1,000 extra patients, which means half less doctor.
Yes. And so that means, in essence, you're standing still, but actually working harder.
Exactly. That's exactly what it means.
Yeah.
So, but then if you did the opposite, and so you said, okay, well, let's say that we're going to close our list size, right? So this is what, when you're looking at, when Hillary's saying to you, how much do we earn, how much do we, just use this, because you can fiddle with it and just adjust it even by the dozens. So say we stayed exactly the same and went back to 10,586, all of a sudden I can see that we're losing 50 grand, which looks worse, but is actually less than 78. So it would be more convenient for us to stay as we are and close our list size rather than increase, because with the new funding formula, we just lose more the bigger we get.
Right.
But you wouldn't know that unless you're using this to figure out your capitation loss.
Okay. Okay. So the bottom line really is to understand, look to the future, we need to be using this thing.
Exactly.
Yep.
And the reason for that is that this system takes into account the denominator through which QoF points are calculated. So QoF point, an average QoF point, is calculated based on an average list size that has changed as opposed to the previous year. So it's now around 6,800 patients as opposed to around 5,800 patients, which means that the value of everything you do changes based on your list size. And there will be a tipping point where it's just not convenient for you to keep growing your list size. And if in Tower Hamlets it's inevitable that you do, unless you shut it, you need to know how much you're losing. And unless people are able to project how much they lose, like this is conservative, this isn't true. You've actually got to project, with the Tower Hamlets population growth, what will this be once I've gone beyond the tipping point of my projected list size.
Right, so the marginal benefit of having an extra patient is gradually decreases as the tipping point you're talking about.
Exactly, yes, that's exactly right. And you just need to find, I mean, if you were being super strategic, what you would do is fiddle with this list size until you actually found the exact number that showed that you were losing less money. Again, not realistic in a borough that has a 25% population growth.
And not realistic in a rules, the rules being that you can't shut your list off.
Correct. And definitely not realistic if you're removing practice boundaries, obviously.
Exactly.
So.
Yes. Yes, okay. So that's it.
So this is, that's the reckoner.
What else do you think we need to know?
The other thing, nothing from the reckoner, but I would say it would be quite helpful. I'm going to just open, my partners will kill me if I give
no, you don't have to give us any
specific numbers, but let's see if I can find a template of our financial forecast.
Do you want me to turn this away?
No, don't worry. We're not that. Okay. Do you guys use this before I even go into explaining what it is?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But maybe we should be using it if we're not using it.
If you're not using it, I think you have a problem. Okay, so I'll explain this in 2 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. So the losses that I think people need to estimate are 2. One is what is my next year likely to be, and the second is what are the next 7 years likely to be. And these need to be calculated separately. One is for your immediate survival, and the second is to know whether you're concerned about closing at some stage over the next years.
But also about whether we take on another, doctor and for how many sessions.
Correct, yeah completely. So now we've always done this. This hasn't been MPIG, and I suspect, I mean, we're not, we're discovering ice here. I'm sure every practice does it. But what happened this year is that for the first time, so what we've always done is we've had a target income, and the way we try and estimate our target income is from the total income, that's the global sum, the QOF, etc., which is available from the Ready Reckoner, and then we estimate the value of all the other services, so non-NHS services, NISs, DESs, LESs, and I can show you how we do that at some stage. We sadly think we will be making less than last year, which we already know, but we're being optimistic and saying we need to make at least 1.5 million. We then set ourselves targets around admin staff, around clinical staff. I should actually freeze the panes so you can see what's on this side. Okay. So we set ourselves targets for our payroll staff, our nurse costs, and our salaried GPs. We have a pot for locums, and we have basically our absolute total, what we are able to spend, including practice expenses, bills, etc., etc. And then the difference, obviously, between our expenditure and our income are the profits that we will then be splitting up. Now, this is quite nifty because if you come out at the top and you realise that you won't be getting, so 1.5 million means that we all take a severe hit in profits, and we're not likely to achieve this. But say my estimates were closer to 1.2 million, I'd be closing today. I would be able to see straight away how the profits would be affected. So basically what happens is that as we every month include the sums in these columns, we have a forecast and a cumulative total that tells us how much our profits are likely to be. So at this moment in time, our profits for the year are forecast at 72,000. Divide that by 6, that's what we're likely to make over the year. Obviously this number will change because we get paid every quarter, but it's just about sort of keeping your eye on it, because you will have a definite idea of, if we did make, say, 250 grand profit, we know that we would each be going home with about 40k at the end of the year for a full-time, whole-time equivalent. And this is what tells us that we won't be able to make it through the year.
Right.
So it's a mixture of two things. It's that my forecast is ringing alarm bells, so it's telling me you're likely to make 50 grand for a 9-session partner. And my MPIG is saying, I confirm that you will lose at least 78 grand, and we haven't even looked at the enhanced services yet. So these are the two things that I think are absolutely crucial. If anybody is not using a 12-month forecast, that needs to be done.
Right, so this is your spreadsheet.
This is my spreadsheet.
Okay, so in theory, each of us probably have, hopefully, a spreadsheet like this.
Yes.
If we did not, could we ask you for a template?
For sure,
yeah.
But I would say, I think that every clinical partner needs to know that, like, it has to be in their back pocket along with their national insurance number. These are fundamental to navigation.
So we just have to, because I, as a partner, don't know anything about this.
Okay.
Our accountant, doesn't think we're terribly businesslike, and we're not. And but so I will check if we've got
and
this.
If you haven't got it,
and if we haven't got it, I'll
share.
ask you for
a
template.
So 2 more things
yes.
I'm going to show you just in 2 seconds is that it would be helpful probably for people to also have, we create profit margin forecasts for every single enhanced service that we offer as a practice. So we say if we meet all the targets, this is our profit margin. If we meet none of the targets, this is our profit margin. The profit margin we actually made last year was this %, and then we translate it in actual revenue. So once we've deducted all the cost from everything. The reason we do this isn't because we're actually crazy, but it's because we then sum the revenues of the total enhanced services of all types, and we're able to forecast what the actual pounds per patient would be that we would earn outside of the capitation in the global sum. So I will basically take the sum total of everything, add it to my global sum, divide it by my list size, and then I have a gross pounds per patient. The reason this is so important is that the MPIG is only offering a partial picture. So while at the moment we're fighting MPIG, I think there's a real case for arguing the wider case, because what you would then do with this is that we would make a spreadsheet that shows how the proportion of our revenue streams is changing. So you'd have, I don't know if I'm putting this in the right place, but you'd basically have bar charts that show not only the decrease of your income, but also the difference in the breakdown. So if MPIG has been squeezed this much, have enhanced services been proportionately enlarged? If capitation has gone up by this much, does that mean what's gone and what's coming? Where are we actually losing the money from? Which I think helps make a much stronger business case. But you can't make that business case if you don't know your gross your gross pounds per patient and the value of your enhanced services, the actual value of your enhanced services.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say, this is just sort of something that NHS England suggests, and we already do it, but if someone's not doing it, it also helps you to have a summary. Let me see if I've got a summary up here somewhere. I might have it at the bottom of the page, but you basically end up having a summary, anyway, it looks like something like this, that shows you which of your services are actually loss leaders and you may want to consider not doing them at all, and which ones instead do make you a fair amount of profit. Yes, so this is it. So this tells us all the services that we're running at a complete loss, so surgical aftercare at a loss, sexual health at a loss, CVD secondary prevention at a loss, mental health at a loss.
That's interesting.
So if I was looking at making efficiencies, what I'd be stripping out would be these four. I'd be saying these four we don't provide, and instead what we'll try and do is do a lot more. We already do the most we can with diabetes, but I basically pick a few that do make me a profit, like phlebotomy did before it went out for tender, because now it won't. But just pick those services with the greatest profit margin and try and get rid of everything that's basically baggage that you're carrying.
Yeah. Although what I would say is that what I'm trying to do is provide
Absolutely.
a service.
Which is why we're still providing them.
And in a sense, some services subsidize other services.
Completely. I completely and totally agree with you, which is why we've removed none of these.
Yeah.
But
at least you know what's in red.
When you go to NHS England and they say, have you looked? Yes,
Sure.
actually we have looked, and so I'm going to ask NHS England now, are you happy for us to stop providing CVD secondary prevention? Is that your suggestion?
But we in Tower Hamlets have CVD secondary prevention. Other people don't have that.
Correct.
So we're actually trying to provide this service, and we have resource for it, and yet the resource doesn't meet
it's not adequate. And next year it won't be adequate for phlebotomy either. So phlebotomy will run at a loss, and extended hours is run at a loss.
Yeah, and they've cut QOF CVD stuff, CVS, and that's going to, so the resource for cardiovascular disease is decreasing.
Correct.
Significantly.
But it's just important that you know that,
Yeah.
so that you know sort of where you do want. If you were a practice that was on its last leg to struggle and you just didn't want
you
to
had
shut,
to cut
this
something.
is the sort of thing.
Yeah, you'd have to be able to target the right stuff.
Now the last thing I'm going to show you is actually a Ramsey brand template, which is quite useful. I don't know if you've seen this.
I haven't seen it, no.
Okay, so this is quite a handy way of doing a 7-year projection. And all it is what I've just showed you, done over 12 months. You change the headings and you do it, so the math is exactly the same behind it. You do it over 7 years. So it's basically a projection of your global sum over 7 years, deduction of your out of hours and any changes in the percentage of the deduction. You're phasing out of MPIG. You're phasing out of seniority because, mind you, the BMA's calculator did not include the phasing out of seniority. That's an extra loss. Patient participation, which again that did not include. Unplanned admissions, which for Tower Hamlets will hardly count because we won't be making any money out of this, given we already had a NIS that basically covered the same requirements. But it's good to know that we won't be making any money, at least when they say, well, there's now unplanned admissions, we can say we're already providing that. Then your QOF, your estimated QOF loss, and then you basically have a 7-year projection, which would show you that if this year you've got a decrease of, say, £3,000, that's likely to be £137 at year 7, and that may tell you that you want to jump on board with this campaign because this year being okay does not at all mean that long-term you'll be okay. And this is why I'm so keen that practices know this stuff, because even if this year you feel okay, because your finances month on month are looking all right, looking ahead to me means that you know when you won't be all right, and this shows it.
Is this from the Ready Reckoner?
This is
where do you find the figures to fill in these this sheet?
You get them from your practice manager, who
Okay.
knows your global sum, your out of hours deduction, should know your patient participation value,
Yeah.
etc.
And so this particular spreadsheet
is only on paper at the moment. I will be making it, so I'm happy to circulate it
right.
as a template to practices if anybody's interested in having it. But I guess what's really important then is what I'm saying. your Ready Reckoner, you've got to know with your estimated growth, otherwise it makes no sense, and with the maximum possible earnings for enhanced services, what your actual loss is. Your 12-month forecast, so it tells you, are you scared now, or have you got a few months to fight, and your 7-year projection.
Right. But making the calculation on the basis of your maximum earnings from NIS and QAF, so if you don't make those points, obviously you're going to earn less.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I would say actually for the QAF bit, we pretty much couldn't earn any more on QAF than we do. So I think we're 9 points off the maximum. Let me go back in and get it. Yeah, so we're about 9 points off the maximum. Put in your actual QAF earnings here, but definitely when you get to your enhanced services, put in the maximum earnings you could have achieved, because this is just money that's being stripped out, along with the patient participation and a whole host of others that are being paid, phlebotomy, that are being paid less. So I think you just really you just need to know. The last thing I would say, and here I realise I'm getting a bit complicated and may not have a lot of people on board, is that it's quite important to also know something around your resource and your demand. So we've been doing this for years, but we basically have a spreadsheet that calculates for every single GP how many sessions they work, how many patients they've seen, how many appointments they have booked into other doctors' surgery, and how many calls they have taken during the morning. And this sort of gives us an average of appointments per session, appointments made per session, and calls taken per session. And the reason this is helpful is to know your trend. So are you doing a lot more than you were 2, 3, 4 years ago? What's your total number of appointments? What's your total number of calls? And also, have you got the right pairings in each day? But this is more about practice management. So you wouldn't put sort of 3 super fast people together. You'd sort of try and stagger them out. And what you end up with is a graph that looks like this. Is a graph that shows you your workload throughout the year. So you can sort of trace it over 7 years, which is what we've done, and then make a case between the gap of your resources, which I've just explained how you calculate your resources, and your actual demand, and you're sort of able to create a graph that shows the mouth widening, which I think will be a very useful tool for NHS England to see, and they have asked us to produce this. I'm going to get all these things together so that they all look the same on one page, but again, if you haven't got your trends, and we've even got them by day of the week, we've got them by town, we've got them in all sorts of ways, it will be difficult to make a case for you saying I have less resource and more demand if you don't actually have the numbers to show that. So I would suggest if people aren't counting that might be...
How do you actually gather that data?
We have one person who sits in front of EMIS for about 2 hours every Monday morning and does this, and does slot history.
Yeah.
Who booked this, who returned it, 1-1, 1-1, 1-1, and sums.
Okay,
it's a manual count.
That's okay. You see what if this were mechanized.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I've called EMIS about 20 billion times.
But you'd think there would be a firm doing this because this is very important stuff.
I agree. I completely agree. It would be ideal.
It would be great because you could analyze how long the consultations were, and so on. Because this data is there.
How long it takes to answer a call or to bring somebody back. You could analyze a whole host of things. And I think that some of these you can analyze. The thing that I can't find is who has picked up which call, who has booked it, and who has returned it. EMIS isn't able to do that, so we do manual counts. Yeah.
Are they thinking about...
I don't know. There's an EMIS course next Friday, which I'm going on to, around searches to suggest they do this. But I think that for practices that don't use the Doctor First system, this may be perhaps less useful. But it would still be useful. Before we used Doctor First, we still calculated every session how many calls were being returned, how many patients were being seen, and what was the total number of demand.
I think it can be useful to have a sense of how many, also different types of consultations.
Yeah.
We're thinking about I'm thinking about introducing a kind of email consultation. So that takes some time. It's not as if it's finding ways of people not having to come in if they don't have to come in.
Absolutely. But I think it is. I guess overall, if you look at it from an MPIG perspective, it's just a useful way of showing the growing gap between your demand and your resource. But you need to know your resource in great detail, and you need to know your demand in great detail, and then you can make a case for not being in a position that you would define as viable.
Okay. Is that it?
And that's my spiel.
Fantastic.